This is the Indigenous Environmental Network. For more information, go to ienearth.org.
Okay, so wanga atka bangangan ng naka pangawi wanga adaka aglaterma naka Kirsten Nugak Pass, and I'm from Savoonga, and I started with IEN in 2021 as requested in our area because there was a geoengineering test being done in Utqiagvik without the free, prior, and informed consent of the tribal members. So I'm going to talk briefly about what geoengineering is. I'm going to talk briefly about that project, and then I'm going to introduce you.
Too loud for people there.
It's too loud, Tom.
Okay, someone else then. Tell me, please.
So I'll talk about geoengineering in general, just a very, very brief overview, and then I'll talk about the project that was happening in Utqiagvik. I'll introduce you to a few people who helped us resist that project at a fundraiser in California a couple years ago. And then after that, we were inspired to do some data collection around what Inuit people think about geoengineering. And so we worked with Saylor and Associates to collect some data, and we're like post-analysis right now, just kind of reorganizing that information, but we have some of it to present to you today. So geoengineering, how many of you have heard of that or kind of understand what that's about? So those are large-scale attempts to change ecosystems in different methods. And so when you talk about geoengineering, scientists will divide it into subgroups. Generally, there's 2 subgroups. Now we're forming even smaller subgroups. So generally it's carbon dioxide removal. So the attempt to remove large quantities of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, or solar radiation management or solar radiation mitigation. You'll hear different variations of that term. And that just means like controlling the amount of sunlight that reaches the earth, or controlling the amount of sunlight that's absorbed by the earth. So then trying to build technologies that will reflect large amounts of sunlight back into space in order to reduce the global temperature. But you'll also hear another subgroup called marine geoengineering, and that's limited to geoengineering that's done in the oceans, which is becoming more and more prominent. There are a lot of tests. If you go to geoengineeringmonitor.com, there is a map on there that will show you not all of the geoengineering testing happening, because we literally cannot keep track of all of it. But you'll see that in the last, 5 years, Cynthia, since like 2018, it's been more than double the amount that there were prior to 2018. And that data goes back into this, is it at the 70s or the 50s geoengineering map? I saw some in the 70s in Alaska, yeah. So it goes back into the 70s. So between the 70s and 2018, there was like 1,000, and then like after that, we've tracked about 1,000. So there's like roughly I can't remember the exact numbers. There are so many that are happening that we just can't even keep up. So the project that we were going to talk about today is called Arctic Ice Project, formerly known as Ice 9/11. And this was created by a woman named Leslie Field, who she is an electrical engineer and a chemical engineer who used to work for HP. She used to work for Chevron for like a decade. And while she was creating this technology, she was actually working for 3M. And Oddly enough, the materials that she uses for her technology are sourced through 3M. And you can use like 15% of your work time at 3M to develop your own project. So she created this idea that you could spread silica hollow glass microspheres onto the Arctic ice to make it more reflective. Because it would make it shinier and reflect sunlight back into space. So no, these are, and several panelists have actually seen, I think actually all of us have seen the material itself. It is very, very small. It's hollow. It floats in the air, kind of the way you would see like powdered sugar poof out of a bag. And it's about the width of human hair or like the size of a white blood cell. So these are very tiny, tiny microspheres. And they wanted to spread millions of tons. They wanted to spend between $1 and $5 billion annually to put this stuff on the Arctic ice to make it more reflective, because the theory is it would thicken the ice. So a lot of the concerns when we learned about this project in our communities, you'll hear more specifically, but they were around like ice safety, because a lot of our subsistence gatherers, a lot of our people travel via ice, and it, like, even if in theory the product would thicken the ice, how it thickened the ice really would matter as well. There were concerns it would make it more brittle. There were concerns because the motors that we use on the water also cannot get sand inside of them. It will kill the motor. And so there were concerns about transportation safety, and there were concerns about human health and animal health, and we'll get into all of that. But those, that's like a very brief overview of the types of geoengineering and the specific geoengineering project. Do you guys have any questions about that before we move on? Anybody confused about any of those? Yep. Cool. Yep. Very nice. Yeah, so that will show you some. Yep. And then like a very brief summary of how this connects back to the fossil fuel industry. If you haven't heard of carbon credits, Carbon Pricing 101 is an excellent workshop as well. But essentially, through the UN and other governing bodies, there are some ways that fossil fuel industry and large polluters can get away with continuing to pollute or polluting even more by use of carbon credits. So they don't have to actually reduce their emissions at source. They can create a technology such as the Arctic Ice Project, which will then give them cooling credits or carbon credits, which they can then increase their quota or increase the cap or the amount that they're allowed to pollute. They can say, oh, we reduced it this much. So then they can refill that cap over and over and over by investing in technology such as Arctic Ice Project. So what we found was a lot of people did not know about the Arctic Ice Project in the communities where it was being tested, namely Utqiagvik. And so we found out about a fundraiser that Arctic Ice Project was having, that they were going to present their findings at this fundraiser. They were not talking to the local people about what was happening, but they were going to host this fundraiser in a country club in California, where they were charging like $10,000 for a VIP table. You could fit 10 people there. And so Tom Goldtooth said, well, let's buy a VIP table and get 10 people there. So I called around legitimately, like it was within a week. And I told people the very brief overview that I told you about geoengineering and the project itself. And people were just so outraged that some people were able to move their schedule around to make it within, I gave you like 2 weeks notice or something like that. So people took time out of their busy lives to come down to California to try to confront the people who were doing this project without talking to us. and without talking about the potential health impacts. We wrote a letter and sent it to all the tribes to be able to sign on, asking Arctic Ice Project to stop what they were doing until they had the consent of every tribe that would be impacted. So within a 10-day period, I think we got 15 tribes to sign, which is huge. And we also asked Sara and Michael ran off with Sequoia because Sequoia is so sweet, is not liking the heat, I think. And we also asked Karen and seven other people to come. And we bought a VIP table, and Arctic Ice Project sent us $10,000 back and said that they were full. And then we asked non-native allies to purchase tickets after us, and they were permitted into the event. So we did have people actually attend on the inside who were connected to us, and we were able to kind of see what was happening in there. But I wanted to invite Michael, Sara, and Insakan to share their firsthand experience in that. Do you want to go first, or you want first?
Hi, Huanga Insakan nga suputan ko nun jin kun ashkakaw nga Savoonga mi. My name is Karen Insakan Pungowiyi from Savoonga. I was born to Dennis and Jean Pungowiyi. I was happy to go with my niece to California to protest these microspheres they were going to spread in our Arctic oceans. And I was very, very concerned because our food source mainly comes from the ocean. And so on top of all that, the military left a huge mess on my island at Northeast Cape, and I've worked at Alaska Community Action on Toxics to help clean that our island up. The military has been not very nice to us. Who was that went to Savoonga? I could never remember there. Anyways, they went to Savoonga, Army Corps, after they had done some cleanup over there, and they told us that the water was safe to drink and the food safe and everything. So, and then people were protesting saying, no, you didn't clean it up, because ACAT did some tests and there were still some heavy metals and PCBs right below, right? They did surface cleanup. And so we offered Kasaboom some water, and he refused to drink it. It was, it's not very nice. So anyways, my concern about the bioengineering and stuff is for our animals, because food sources are number one concern right here, because 95% of our food comes from the ocean. And, all these chemicals that the military left are in our fish, our food that we eat, and it biomagnifies as it's eaten by. So when it gets to me, it's real high. So the rate of cancer on my island is very, very high. Younger and younger people. I mean, I could cry. I've had 2 sisters with breast cancer. One of them passed, another one's a survivor. My aunt had breast cancer. I mean, my grandfather died from cancer. There's cancer everywhere on my island, around the villages where the military was. And I don't mean to go on and on about this, what the military left, but bioengineering is going to magnify all the other contaminants that are being poured into our Arctic environment. I mean, there's plastics, it's in our food, it's in the fish, we ingest it every day, and trash from all over the world comes to our island. It comes to the beaches, learning disabilities, just endocrine disruptors. We have learning disabilities among our children. I mean, there's just so much. And to add more to it is mind blowing to me. I just can't imagine adding more trash to it. You know, that's what that is. It's trash. It's gonna what? It's gonna go back to the atmosphere. And what is that gonna do? We don't have any scientific proof that it's gonna work, right? What is millions of microspheres gonna do? I think it's going to do more damage to the environment, to our fish, to our foods, to humans, because we're going to ingest it. I saw that material. You blow it just like dust, smaller than dust, and it flies all over. It's going to be in our air. We're going to breathe it. We're going to eat it. Yeah, it's just outrageous to me. And sometimes I use fancy words like, you know, shit and stuff, but it literally is shit that they're throwing on my land, and I'm not going to sit still and watch them do that. I'm happy to be here, and if you have any questions, please ask. My cousin Perry over there is a whale hunter. He provides for the village, you know. The whales, they found PCBs and other stuff in their intestines. We have lots of birth defects on the island. But most of our food is walrus, seal, the whale that he hunts, and we depend on that on the island. The cost of other foods that come to our island, like beef, chicken, and stuff. How much a pound is ground beef? 16. Yeah, so and some of it that's bought over there is freezer burned, refrozen. So we depend on our food, and that's what I'm fighting for, is to save our food sources and our people. I mean, it's devastating. We've gone to this. We've done a cancer registry, and they told us that it was, what was it, normal range? Yeah, that it was, I mean, our PCB levels are 10 times more than the national average. So you know we're going to get it. Our St. Lawrence Island is right in the middle of the Bering Sea, and everything washes up towards there. So I know ACAT has done a lot of work for us and tested our food that we eat and the lands that we live on, and the PCBs have flown in the air all the way to our mountains and our village in Savoonga, and that's 85 miles, 90 miles. And so it's spreading. It's still there on our island, and I really believe that bioengineering is just gonna kill our world, because our creator created everything to work together to make it, you know, the circle of life. So that's how I was raised, and I'm 69 years old, and I was raised back in the day when there was no electricity, no TVs, no radios, very little outside influence, and it was a much different world back then, you know. And so I know about, I don't like to call it subsistence, because we didn't subsist, we thrived. And so, and now the hunters have to go farther and farther out to hunt for our food. And because of die-offs, we had huge die-offs of birds out on St. Lawrence Island. In a 5-mile radius, there was 100 birds per mile. Thousands of birds, because they're not eating. Their food source is going. The little fish that they eat is getting too warm, and so what bioengineering is going to do, I believe, even though I don't have a degree or anything, it's just common sense, that they're going to speed up the process of this global warming. They don't know what the hell they're doing. They're putting shit up there that's, they're putting stuff up there that's gonna harm and damage our environment more. And so I'm gonna speak up anytime I have the opportunity to stop this. It's very important to me and my family. And St. Lawrence Island people are very close-knit families. So, I mean, close-knit people. So a lot of times information doesn't get out to them, so they don't know what's going on. And if information is sent out there, then it's not read, or people are not interested in it. So it's important for people like ACAT to go out there and educate people on what's going on around the environment where they live and stuff. So I'm going to stop here and pass it on. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll ask my other questions later. I just did not understand
Yeah.
whether they've already tested it
Yes.
or not.
Yes, the question was whether they've tested it already or not. So I wanted to give a little summary, segue, and then I'll answer your question, and then I'll pass it on to Sarah. Does that sound good? So the history that Karen talks about is something that I normally talk about as well, and I'm so glad that Insakan is here to share that. This just shows that this is a continuation of that colonial use of indigenous lands as both the stepping stool and the dumping ground of the global north and Western society. We're there for resource extraction, and we're there to be tested on. We've been tested on multiple times. There were radioactive iodine injections where people were told that they were helping the space program and that they were going to go to the moon, but they were children who were injected with radioactive iodine. And it took people like Annie Aloha speaking up and noticing that there were high rates of cancer on the island, because there are two thoroughways to the Arctic, the Bering Strait and the Fram Strait. And that's where all of the pollutants travel to the north, because pollutants are attracted to the poles. So there are only two ways for the pollutants to get there, and our island is in the middle of one of them. And so it's an accumulative effect. The pollution plus climate change plus additional pollution that yes is being tested. So they spread football fields worth of this material in Utqiagvik without talking to the local peoples. They went through one for-profit corporation, but they didn't speak to the tribe, and they didn't inform the local people. So yeah, it was being tested outside. Now what they did is one of the tactics that mining corporations also use. In theory, this is what they did. They noticed that people were noticing. They dissolved that name. They changed their name. So they went from Ice 9/11 to Arctic Ice Project. So when we confronted them in California, they said that, no, we didn't do the testing there. Ice 9/11 did the testing. We're Arctic Ice Project. The same board members, it's the same staff members, same substance, same materials, different name. So, yeah.
Oh, I just knocked that off. Uvanga sa kanya, Utqiagvik miruranga, Alaska Community Action on Toxic Savaktunga. My name is Sara, or Sekanyak, and I grew up in Utqiagvik. And I'm here representing myself, but also Alaska Community Action on Toxics, a nonprofit that is working on environmental health and justice, like Karen mentioned. And I'm super grateful to be here. First of all, I just have to say, I connected with Panganga through this ICE 911 project. And my husband actually worked on the research. He was the logistics lead at UIC, the corporation that she mentioned, Utqiagvik Inupiaq Corporation. And so I heard about this project a long time ago from him, because he'd come home like, what the hell are they doing? And I'm not sure if he's gonna make it back with the baby, so maybe I'll just share a little more about that. But he, yeah, I heard about this woman, Leslie Fields, and the like terrible way she was going about her research through my husband and also through my parents, who are researchers themselves. And so when Panganga asked about it, I was like, oh, I think we're interested in working around this, because my husband went to his bosses after seeing the guys in the field covered in this white stuff and being concerned, like, why isn't she bringing data back? You know, generally the scientists would bring data back year by year, and she wasn't doing that. And he was concerned for their health and safety, and he raised a red flag and said, I won't work in this project again. I want off of this project. And his boss said, well, it's bringing in a lot of money, and so we're going to continue it. And so anyways, long story short, so we ended up going down to the Bay Area for this protest. And just to step back for a minute, to me, it's really important. I started getting into this type of work, yes, because I was concerned about the health of my community. Just so many rare diseases, you know, young people dying of cancers, young people having lupus, having to take medication for thyroid issues from a teenager age, just too much of that. But also, more so than that, I feel there is a spiritual assault on the people with the corporations having their access, having their identity, and you know, having for-profit corporations represent you on a national level, for example, taking pictures with Donald Trump and actually endorsing Donald Trump for the first time ever, making an endorsement. Stuff like that is really concerning, because we do have the highest rates of suicide in, I believe, the state of Alaska. I mean, it's just off the charts. I don't know the numbers, but we have really high rates of suicide. And I witnessed a lot of loss of my peers, just kind of because there's not much change, right? We have so much stagnance and the same. So, yeah, just working on these issues and trying to get people, because a lot of people are shut down. At the moment you come out and you advocate against what the corporations are doing, maybe you ask a question about climate change and the fact that our economy is 95% run by oil and gas. You start asking those questions and you get kind of, you know, put into a category. You're kind of maybe put on some lists of not being hired in certain spaces. And so it's really difficult. And so for me, though, I grew up there, little Euro-American girl that was raised non-religious in this community of, you know, this Inupiaq community. So I guess for me, I'm used to kind of being the odd one out. So I kind of, I feel comfortable in that role, and I'm really grateful to do it, honestly. But going down to the Bay Area was eye-opening to me, because the question is, how far away from where you are could the answers to climate change be? And for people in the Bay Area who, the people that were hosting it, they own a car dealership, I believe. And, you know, thinking about all the emissions, the Lexus of Marin County, or I don't know, they, you know, the emissions that their enterprise creates, they don't care to act on that. No, that's more, let's look to the far northern reaches of the world, and let's try and do the work there. And it was obvious talking to people that, well, something's better than nothing, right? To which, like, my husband would say, absolutely not, you know, especially when it comes to the effects on the animals. And we really are out there on the ice all the time, you know, living off of the land. It's just a beautiful thing. And another thing that we pointed out that was, I guess I'll say for him since he's not here, just that this type of project is obviously missing the mark in many ways. For one, we know that it's driven by greed. It's driven by a desire to make money. But also that it's looking at the sun as the problem. When we know we can cut back on our emissions, we can look at our waste, we could do a lot with what we have right now. but they don't want to talk about that. And so this is really just like another backwards way of thinking about how we can make it seem like we're doing something when we know that those people that work in those corporations, they don't really care. I mean, I've had many personal communications with them, and they're like, we've given it to God, and we're just headed for oblivion. We're headed for the end of times. And I'm not kidding. I wish I was, because it's really terrible that a lot of people in leadership think like that, because I'm here to say I believe in the just transition, and I'm excited for the transition, and I believe in all of us collectively, and things like this gives me a lot of hope. Stop there.
Thank you. Did anybody have questions for Sara? At all? Yeah, we'll have later space for more questions. Yeah. Utqiagvik. Yeah. So the hand demonstration, it's at the very top. It's Barrow. It used to be called Barrow, so it's at the very, very top of Alaska. And the plan is they've spread this there. They're working in Canada now. They're working with Syntef now because they know that they can't just do outdoor experiments without talking to people. So now they're working with Syntef, and some of the other concerns that we had where they were talking about the animal experiments they were doing, but they're essentially testing the embryos of animals, different species of birds and fish. They're exposing the embryos to this material to see how those will react. So they're seeing if it's toxic. But they're not talking about inhalation. We have a very high rate of tuberculosis where we're from because the gravel has silica in it, and silica is so abrasive it can cause tuberculosis. So we have a high rate of tuberculosis already. We have a high rate of kidney disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and all of those are linked back to silica, which we already have an abundance of in our environment. So with that, I'll talk about a couple of other projects because these folks traveled with me and talked to a lot of people. And we're very, very grateful, very, very grateful for that. So we wanted to get, we knew what we thought Indigenous peoples thought about these projects, but we wanted to be able to prove the concerns and to record the concerns in a way where the data wasn't tainted. Yeah, I was not allowed. I had to have the best poker face, and I had to travel around and tell people what these projects intended to do without looking like I thought it was negative. And I was like, okay. So there's a couple other projects that we shared because they're being done in Alaska as well. One of them is called Real Ice, and this project is run out of Wales, UK, by a guy from Ireland. And he thinks that if you put a bunch of ice pumps, so he's going to put water pumps on top of a bunch of ice in the Arctic. And other studies have shown that if you want this to work or to make a dent, you'd have to cover about 10% of the Arctic with these pumps. So he wants to put hydrogen fueled green hydrogen battery water pumps onto the ice to suck the water from underneath the ice and to spill it over the top in order to thicken the ice. And he actually came to Nome and tested this material. They paid a local $20,000 to drive them around for 2 weeks, a non-native person. They didn't talk to the tribes. They didn't talk to any of the corporations, like Coeric is one of the nonprofit native corporations who is viewed as somebody that you would talk to. They didn't talk to the health corporation. They just went, they talked to the mayor. They paid one local person a bunch of money to drive them around, and they tested this water pump on the ice. By the way, Leslie Field was going to test her materials off the coast of Nome as well. Luckily, Austin Amasuk, and then Akaluk or Adrian Blatchford, they said no way. They said that people in Barrow were concerned about whaling, so they wanted to test it in a place where there was no whaling. But there's whaling in Nome. They get beluga whale. We rely heavily on marine mammals all over the coasts of Alaska. So, and then the other project, did we talk about another project? Those were the two main ones. Yeah. Yeah. So I wanted to hand this over to Brian, maybe? Oh, me. Is it me now? Yeah. Got it. Yeah, it's good. So we wanted to talk to people about those two projects. We did a brief overview of geoengineering, and we talked about free, prior, and informed consent as well. And we wanted to talk to people about what that looked like. What would free, prior, and informed consent look like in your community? And what concerns do you have? Or we didn't even say concerns. We said, what impacts would these projects have, positive or negative, in your community? And we collected the data. And we're hoping to be able to use this. We'd like to publish this in a place where geoengineering proponents would have to interact with it. We had these two researchers, as well as, I forgot his name already. Doug Kazi, who is also an Arctic researcher, because a lot of Indigenous communities in the Arctic have interacted with researchers who have lived there for decades and are doing good work. And they're working in collaboration with the community. And the geoengineering proponents and the researchers who come, they're a completely different breed of researcher. They're not the same. They're not collecting data that's going to help the community. They're not giving back to the community. So that's some of the stuff that we learned.
Do you want to talk about?
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So we wanted to collect data from affected populations. So, of course, Indigenous peoples. We also talked to hunters and subsistence experts, people who would be considered local leaders or tribal leaders. We spoke to Arctic researchers themselves and other researchers that were concerned with issues of informed consent. Yep. So we've synthesized that data. We're reviewing that still right now. We're kind of like organizing it in a way that makes sense to all of us. And then this is just, we're going to give an overview of just like little tastes of the different themes that we came across.
So, who's next?
Who wants to
Is-
do the Cosmovision?
Do you moved the Cosmovision, Dad? I can do that. So we really wanted to, like Panganga was saying, and this is my name is Anda Saylor Whiskey of Saylor and Associates. My father is Brian Saylor. My mom is Pamela McDowd Saylor, and they're from Pennsylvania, and my ancestors came over on the Mayflower and are from Ireland. And I grew up in Alaska. My husband is actually from Utqiagvik. He grew up there. He's not from there. But we really wanted to practice listening, and we wanted to have these conversations in such a way that we weren't trying to push somebody one way or the other. So these themes that came up, did you want to say something? Oh, okay. These themes that came up were just what people said, and they said it over and over. There was a lot of consistency amongst all these different groups that we talked to. We did interviews over the phone, over Zoom, in person. We did focus groups when we traveled. So one theme that came up was a similar. Actually, maybe you should do this one. Yeah, I'll let you do this one, and then I can read some of the quotes.
Similar to what, though? Finish your sentence.
There was a similar theme of recognizing the way that Mother Nature will right herself if left alone. Not just that we shouldn't intervene, we shouldn't do this, they're like, this is the fossil fuel industry is bad. It was that if we cease, there's these healing mechanisms that happen, and that is better than anything that we could possibly do. And Mother Nature is going to get mad and push back. And geoengineering was definitely put into this same category, rightly so, that it's also messing with Mother Nature, and people were like, that's not going to work. Like, we already know that's not going to work. Oh, thanks. Okay. So I'll just read you some quotes. Everything seems to be wrapped up around these ideas of snaring Mother Nature. Mother Nature will tell you, back off, bitch. It's the truth. You can't harness Mother Nature no matter how hard you try. Technologies will not change it. Adversely, it will. It will affect everything adversely. So seabirds may mistake the microspheres for fish eggs. This would introduce the silicospheres into the food chain. Nature is fragile and could react to the introduction of something new. Another person said, we don't know what will happen in the future. It's like our farm since time immemorial. We don't want more debris in our farm. It could affect marine mammals. It could affect everybody. So, who's next? Introduce yourself, Dad.
My name's Brian Saylor. I'm a retired guy. Worked with Health and Human Services in Alaska for about 50 years, with the University of Alaska for a long time, circumpolar health studies. And grateful to be retired, because now we can work with Panganga, and it's really a trip. Listening to people who are directly affected by these geoengineering projects was an eye-opener. And just as a bit of background, one of my assignments at the University of Alaska was Vice Provost for Research and Health Affairs. And we were very, very sensitive to the importance of involving rural communities, all affected communities, in the research that's being done. It's part of the free, prior, and informed consent. It's part of the National Science Foundation Principles for Conduct of Research in the Arctic. It's what we do. And I had never seen such a blatant disregard for international and national policy as I saw surrounding these geoengineering projects. One thing that we heard over and over again was that both the Arctic Ice Project and real ice were seen by local people as very intrusive. One person said, I see a danger in the mindset that people from the outside are just going to come in and save the planet, and we don't want to hear anything about traditional knowledge. Just a little aside there, we heard it in a variety of ways, but one of the funny things was that people who come up to Barrow are suddenly experts on the ice, and they don't ask people who have lived there for 12,000 years what they know. Inupiaq people have been in this area for tens of thousands of years and don't take kindly to people who think they discovered a new continent when they visit the North Slope. And I think this was the Real Ice Project. It was a lady from Texas who was funding it and wanted to make a documentary with another guy from the UK. They said they were looking at a few places. They wanted it to be easily accessible from a road. When I advised them to talk to the tribes, at least the lady was like, we're doing just a small scope project. It seems like a lot of work to do. So they didn't want to talk to people. They avoided these conversations. Another said, I think researchers need to build relationships. I think that's the biggest thing. We have scientists come in and out of our communities constantly. They want to get published. They want to get recognized in their career. And they don't have investments in our best interests. So in other words, the conversations that we had with local people said that they are not well treated by these projects, and they feel these projects are intrusive.
Yeah. You brought something you know, all this global warming and stuff that we're talking about, my grandfather Dumlu told me that Mother Earth, this is coming. He told me when I was a little girl. Okay, so he says in our native language, it's called Utqiagvik. And that means, translated into English, it means the Mother Earth is going to cleanse herself, and I don't know how to describe it, but it's like turning herself inside out, and so she'll start to heal. So my grandfather Dumlu told us when we were little kids that this was coming, and that bad things are going to impact our way of life. And change happens so fast. Here I am, 69 years old, and talking about this shit, you know. And I wanted to say more about Northeast Cape. I know this is bioengineering, but everything is added on top of that. My people, the military signed a contract saying that they would leave my island as pristine as they found it. No, they brought in more shit. They put in asbestos in their buildings. When they left, they didn't want to leave the fuel oil to our people, so they punctured holes into their big container tank, and it went into the Suki River, where it killed all our fish. Our fish are finally coming back, but the military does not, they treat people like disrespectfully when they're over there. They speak to them like, we've done so much work for you cleaning up your island. Well, you brought the shit, clean it up, all of it. God damn it, you know? And there's so much you can do. We've gone to Washington, D.C. Alaska Community Action has gone with a group of people from there. They still don't want to listen to us. They don't give a rat's ass about us. So that's why this is really important to us, to fight from scientists, or are they scientists? From putting more shit into our environment that's not going to work. Because the environment, our earth, has a way of replenishing and cleaning itself. So if we don't live, somebody else is going to be the top dog. But I have lots of grandchildren, and I want to talk a little bit about biomagnification. All the pollutants that the military left out on St. Lawrence Island are biomagnified as it's eaten. The seals eat the fish, we eat the seal, so it grows in our system. So yeah, we have lots of thyroid problems with our children, women unable to have children, so many endocrine disruptors that affect the learning of our children. Just so much. It's so hard to absorb, and for me, following Panganga and other groups like this is important, because we're fighting to help our Mother Earth and each other. So to me, it's important, because I've got lots of grandchildren and lots of nieces and nephews and family that are going to have to live with what we brought, you know? And I want to be able to say that I tried to help my kids, to help the future generations. So I'm sorry, I'm a crier. Here you go.
You tried and you did.
Thank you. it's really important that we bring frontline community members here to be able to share from their perspective what's happened. We have data that we've collected, but that frontline perspective is so much more valuable than anything we could share with you today. So thank you. Speaking of traditional knowledge, there was a clear theme and a clear sense that researchers of geoengineering didn't respect traditional Indigenous knowledge. So here's some of the quotes. One of them says, "Even though people who depend on Arctic ice for their livelihood know far more of its characteristics and movements and the possible impacts of any climate change intervention, they are not consulted about interventions." There was a clear danger of people unfamiliar with the Arctic misunderstanding the health and welfare of people who live here. Without using traditional knowledge, the community cannot make informed decisions. So one person said, we have this Indigenous knowledge system of the ocean. There are repercussions that we can't account for. We would make decisions about how safe the ice is, what kinds of animals to go for, and when, based on what we've been taught for generations and generations, which makes the ocean unsafe for us. Without knowing this, the geoengineering testing is happening. This could be devastating. Another person said, from what I know, those organizations, they're not very respectful to anyone, especially Native communities. We are disposable to them. Did you want to do the next theme? Yeah.
Sorry, hopefully my computer will make it through this whole presentation. So there was little awareness of the opportunity to collaborate with interested and affected community members. So one person said, there's a feeling of members of the Indigenous communities of the Alaskan Arctic that their input is not valued by researchers or non-local governing bodies. Free, prior, and informed consents puts Native people on the defensive. Another person said, I hope people can really start to critically think about these projects that people are presenting. Who's going to be benefited? Who's going to be the most impacted? And who's involved with those decision making? Because the decision makers are usually the ones who make the most money. And the least decision makers are the ones who are going to be the most impacted, except a few tokenized folks that stand to make a ton of money. I just want to read that again. The decision makers are usually the ones to make the most money, while the least decision makers are the ones who are going to be the most impacted, except for a few tokenized folks that stand to make a lot of money. Very familiar.
The other part of that, with the researchers just generally shunning traditional knowledge, everybody knew that traditional knowledge was essential for the conduct of research in the Arctic. And what the people that we interviewed said was that the sooner that you talk to people who know what's going on, the better off you'll be. And that's why we talk to leaders in the communities, leading subsistence hunters, local leaders, elders. They know what's going on. So one of them said, the moment you have some idea for a project, you need to be sitting down with Indigenous people in the area. They didn't do it. Without using traditional knowledge, the community cannot make an informed decision. We need people to translate between the language of science and the language of the local people. Another person said, we have years and years of observing nature because we are providing for our families. You get to know your food source intimately, their patterns and habits, when to expect them. Traditional knowledge goes hand in hand with actually observing nature 24 hours, 7 days a week. I can observe the weather and wind from just how it feels on my face. The level of understanding of the environment is just something that shouldn't be ignored, but they did. The researchers did. My hope for people here specifically is that they understand that they have worth and value. They have a voice and an opinion that should be heard, and that their lives are meaningful. They have experiences that are new to them and their culture, and they have a right to say no and protect themselves and their communities for future generations. So it seems that people understood who lived there, this is my take on that, that traditional knowledge was an essential ingredient in making any kind of scientific decision or decision to test or how a project should be sculpted.
Communities are not always notified of projects in their areas. I think, I mean, it's sometimes, most of the time, I'd say they're not informed. There was not adequate publication materials or methods available in many communities to alert residents of possible proposed projects. I don't know. Yeah. That was one perception. Like somebody was saying, maybe there's not enough, but we have ways to communicate in our villages. If there's somebody that goes missing, like everybody knows somebody's missing. So there are methods. If you tap into the local community, there are methods for spreading information if you're involved with that community and you're respectful to that community. We have many people come and get a project to do a dissertation and then leave, especially people internationally. And they were talking about National Science Foundation researchers. A person shared 75% of people haven't even talked to the community. There was that quote from that person talking about like how projects would dump 3,000 pages worth of information. Was that come? Okay.
I can speak to it.
Yeah.
There are researchers and a lot of federal agencies that are required by law to consult with local communities. And so they do this. And let me tell you a little bit about how it's done. A large study, it's not a summary, it could be the detail of an environmental impact statement or some sort of a research proposal that could be as much as 1,000 pages, is dropped on a rural community of 250 to 500 people, few of whom have much scientific training. And they said, well, we'd love to get your opinion about this project. Your opinion is due in 2 weeks. Now, I've been an academic. I know how long it takes to do a detailed review of something like that, and it's months. So here they give the impression that they are involving a local community, but with absolutely impossible timelines, and the skills are not within the community at all. So I think what Panganga says is the people there can be communicated with, but a lot of this stuff is just way beyond almost all of us to understand, and the timelines for responses are unreasonable.
Residents were also not treated very well by researchers. So I'll start this quote. I think it's really funny, but I like the end of it. So the sponsors for realized projects said they were looking at a few places. They wanted it to be easily accessible by road. When I advised them, so we heard the beginning before. When I advised them to talk to the tribes, at least the lady was like, we're doing a small scope pilot project. That seems like a lot of work to do before a pilot project. She said, don't they know about climate change? Don't they want to do something? So community members do not have the time or expertise to review detailed proposals. That was what Dad was just talking about. And here's another quote. Most of the projects discussed did not pass through local government approval process. Even if they did, the complexity of many of the projects exceeds the ability of the staff to have a complete understanding of the implications of the projects and its potential effects on the local population. I think here. Oh, there's more on this one. So the whole Western research concept feels paternalistic, like missionaries coming to Alaska to save people. And it's an extension of colonialism. And another concept was that Western researchers don't appear to care very much about the Inupiaq heart-centered model. So this model cares about relationships and interconnectedness. And the Western model is a more economic model, and it's very compartmentalized. All the experiments are very compartmentalized in a, if you ask me, kind of a dumb way. I don't know too much about these geoengineering projects, but as far as I can see, they pay attention to one aspect of one aspect. The only way this could be meaningful is if we take into consideration the beautiful intertwined layers that exist inside of it.
Let me double check on our timing. Oh, we're good. Okay, we're good. That's still more of the same. Same thing. There was a clear disapproval of geoengineering projects among respondents. Some of the quotes are, geoengineering scientists had no idea what they're doing. Geoengineering is dangerous and naive. They're going to kill us all. It's dumb. Don't do things that will change the entire environmental ecosystem. And somebody said, if you're messing with Mother Nature, it's not going to be good. Trying to alter nature is not going to produce any positive things. Stop them. I think it's arrogant to be geoengineering. We've got enough problems. We don't need people screwing around with the ice. The animals have to deal with it. I think it's going to ruin land and sea, the effect of and affect the wildlife. I have no idea how it's going to affect the atmosphere, but I think they should put the research to a stop. The arrogance of science. Someone from DC goes to 2-minute meetings and calls themselves an expert on the Arctic. There may not be, researchers, nope, this is the wrong one, sorry. Yeah, it got a little bit messed up. That's okay. Some of the other stuff, we talked about, there were direct impacts that tribal members knew that the projects would have, such as on the ice itself. We already know that the ice is an ecosystem in and of itself. There's algae that grows underneath the ice. Impacting the amount of sunlight that permeates through that ice is going to impact that algae. The blue cod lay their fish eggs underneath the ice. So trying to suck up water from underneath the ice and spill it over the top is going to impact just the blue cod, but it's going to impact so many other things that we just don't even know about. There are many other projects that have been tested in the Arctic and a lot of other places, and we're going to talk about that in our next workshop with Cynthia. One of them is called ScopeX, and that's really the one that alerted IEN to geoengineering to begin with. This was a project that was headed out of Harvard by a fellow named David Keith. It's a stratospheric aerosol injection project where they want to spray millions of tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. He had about $1 million of Bill Gates funding to pursue this research. He was trying to take a weather balloon filled with mineral dust to test how the dust would travel, and he tried to deploy this over land in Arizona, reservation land in Arizona, without informing the locals. We found out, and Tupac, he stopped it. He gathered people. He had elders. He had people dancing. Harvard was not. David Keith was probably afraid, but says that they didn't have enough of the right weather balloons, so they moved to do their operation somewhere else. He won't admit that it was the local people who stopped him. So then he went to Sweden and tried to deploy the same testing over Sami territory without talking to the Sami peoples. The Swedish government stepped in after the Sami Council published an open letter against Harvard, to which Harvard never replied. They eventually did stop that project. However, David Keith has taken his Bill Gates money, or I think he has at least, and moved to the University of Chicago. And he was just quoted recently saying that the lesson he learned was he will not be as open about what they're doing. Like, his mistake was that he was too open, and that left him vulnerable to people stopping him. And so in one lens, it looks like people are trying to address climate change, but that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to look like climate change is being addressed, but it's done in a superficial way. A lot of people within the Arctic Ice Project fundraiser didn't believe in climate change, and they also did not believe that the project would be effective. And also the people who were donating to the fundraiser didn't realize that it was harming people. I want to say that. Like, the people who were running it and who were making money from it obviously knew that they had done wrong. They changed the name of their organization. They tried to get away and distance themselves from Leslie Field, who has founded a new organization called Bright Ice Initiative, where she's trying to spread roofing granules on the glaciers in the Himalayas, and also in Greenland. So still a lot of work to be done. So the data that we've collected will inform publications that we're going to have available to Inuit communities to reaffirm what they already know. We didn't collect any data. We didn't collect any new data. It's all stuff that we already knew, but it's going to reaffirm and reassure people that their gut is correct, that these projects are going to be harmful if they're allowed to go through. And what it really informs us is that it's the same thing that would have protected us against climate change to begin with. And it's tribal sovereignty, treating people like actual human beings. The only reason that we were allowed to over-emit to begin with is because we're allowed to treat some people as less than. We're allowed to sacrifice some people. And if we weren't permitted to sacrifice those people, we couldn't over-emit. And so we see that same pattern playing over and over again. If you have a group of people that you're able to treat as less than, or if there are loopholes that are permitted to allow you to treat people as less than, then it impacts everything, because at scale, it's not just Indigenous communities who are going to be harmed, it's everybody.
And what I came to see is that the process for correcting this is not one that is welcome either by researchers or by units of local government. There wasn't the free, prior, and informed consent process, which is a part of the United Nations policy. We talked to one of the people that was involved with that, and he was very clear that they didn't know how it was going to work. But there was a policy in place, and I guess they figured, well, that's good enough. Somebody's going to figure it out. But in Alaska, we have regional corporations that work on behalf of numerous tribes. And all of these projects affect large areas. They don't just affect one tribe, then another tribe independently and differently. So there isn't a process or the time available or resources to consult every tribe, nor is there a process to allow for the consultation with the collective, whether it's Coeric or the North Slope Borough or whoever it is. The second thing, so this process was approved in a policy statement, but its implementation was never really discussed. The process itself doesn't exist. So you can have prior and informed consent, but there's no way to do it. We don't know how to do it. The resources at the local level are insufficient as well. There aren't people that can actually review this stuff in a timely manner. So the whole system, it seems, is very well intentioned, but doesn't work, and the researchers don't care. The money, I gotta just give my 2 cents here with the money people. There's something about the well-heeled group of people that wear the guilt of climate change very proudly somehow, for some reason. And if they give enough money to enough of these projects to make sure that they can happen, they feel like they've done their work. The fact of the matter is that the people who have the most experience with Arctic ice and with the other project in Nome, Troy's project in Nome, they were never consulted, and their view is that this stuff will never work. As a matter of fact, it'll be a huge step backwards. So the money that is pushing the researchers forward, and I think there was a comment that for the mining, rare earth mining, that state governments and local governments already have millions of dollars invested in promoting these projects, and they're not going to want to waste that investment. So the thing just keeps on chugging along, and I'm really hopeful that the people at this conference are going to be able to find a way of recommending how we undo some of this stuff.
And I think, it's happening so fast, and I'm so grateful to Panganga and to people in the communities who do see, if this process went through, as you wouldn't get a yes, you wouldn't get it okay, there would not be a go ahead, and there's not time for that, and it's like pretty amazing that people have been able to mobilize so quickly and do something about it.
Before we take questions, I just want to say that we have another workshop that's going to be specifically on strategy, and we'll have more of this discussion will develop on a deeper level. We're going to learn about the technologies a little bit more, and it's going to be great. So it'll be in the next tent over. Are there any questions for us, comments? Yep.
I've been in the process of the Convention on Biological Diversity.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So of course we try to get a moratorium. There's a de facto one, but it's like on the ocean.
Yeah, the 2010 moratorium, which I think ETC Group just made a statement to reopen that because it needs to include more.
Yeah, it's going to be, we are pushing for that
Mm-hmm.
in Cali.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted also to check that if you're in contact with them, to give them more information
Mm-hmm.
on that. And maybe one of you could be on the side event on the panel.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's I'm a biologist, molecular geneticist, and I've also been on one of the jurors of the Common People's Tribunal when it was.
Can I actually give this to you so you can be on the record and say your name as well, please?
Hi, thanks. I'm Ricarda Steinbrecher, and I'm a biologist and molecular geneticist. I was just saying it. In the context of the Convention on Biological Diversity, I've been working there since '95. And you can see it again and again that these suggestions, when they come, they are pushed really always as solutions. And we have the whole biodiversity setting being used as an offset program for climate. And so it's not about biodiversity really in that moment any longer, but to enable offsetting. And biodiversity is collapsing on its own. So therefore, it just is false mathematics, obviously. But in a way, what it allows them to do is, as it was said, is to continue with the policies they have. They basically can justify at home. Well, we've got this decision. We all made that decision. And look, we are saying, we use modern technologies, or we can use others for offsetting. We get the net zeros. So that we struggle with all of that. The interesting thing with science is, and I know it very well in the context of gene drives, which you might not have heard of, but I don't want to go into it. but it's equivalent in genetics, where it's basically, we have a technology that will save people from malaria, like here it's one that will save people from climate change. Therefore, there's an entitlement coming with it. And you saw that entitlement exactly in what this lady was saying, like, don't we know about climate change? We are so important, we are going to save the world, right? And it's quite scary how much money is flowing in, and it gives more and more value to the importance of what scientists think of themselves. And I think it would be more and more important to actually also reach out more into those settings, but that would lay more work onto your feet again. But if there's a strategy session, we can go there. But my concern now would be with these pellets, these little microspheres. I'm just thinking, you recall, like with plastics, like tiny creature in the sea will think it's food, yeah, and they eat it, and there's nothing there to live from, so they will not exist. That means the food chain gets completely interrupted. And if we are just looking at toxicology, and usually the toxicological testing is not really up to scratch, then it's not good. And it reminded me, like, I was saying, like in the when we had the Permanent Peoples Tribunal on sort of toxins from agriculture, like somebody was representing exactly what was happening to people in the Arctic, because it kept traveling by rain, for example, right? Everything ends up on in your food system, and still, it's happening. So I mean, that is when I just had such a shock in that moment. So that did something in me, but a lot of people are not aware of it. And yeah, I mean, if we can help you to get it out, we have quite a network also in the science community, or we can get it on other agendas. I'm more than happy to help.
Can I say one more thing about
the scientific community that's doing these researchers are not involving the people. My great uncle Nick told us that that we had our own culture, our own doctors, engineers, for a society to survive for as long, And my great grandfather was a healer, and his name was Pungowiyi. His brother's name was Nguyen, who was a well-known shaman. And my grandfather, I told you about that word Utqiagvik. It's known to the natives that the Mother Earth will do it herself. She'll clean the environment herself. So with all the testing and all the stuff that they're putting into it is moving it faster and making it worse. They're not going to fix it. This is nature. Nature has a way of eliminating shit like us, that's like the dinosaurs, and the world is going to change whether we try to stop it or not. So the best thing to do is to not put more stuff on it. That's why I don't agree with the bioengineering, spreading those microspheres. The animals are going to eat it, and it's not going to be healthy for them. So, yeah, it's really important to me because, like I said, our food source is very important. It's 95% or more of our diet comes from the ocean.
I wanted to say quickly also that it's not just a food source. It's a source of spiritual sustenance. It's a whole practice in our community. It's about it's not just about food. I mean, we know that it's not just about food. It's about our values and sharing and respecting. There's a lot of respect that goes into it, and it's a relationship that we have. It's not. We're not above the animals that give us sustenance. We're in relationship with them, and we have a responsibility for caring for them. And that's why we're so passionate about it, because it's our responsibility and it's our relationship.
I just wanted to add one more thing because we did see a trend in about maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I was invited into a space where they were talking. It was led by a group of military, largely retired military people, and the conversation was called "The Next Arctic," or was it called "The Blue Market"? Yeah. The Blue Market. Yeah. So it was basically like, let's sit down, and this was largely they invited like 3 people from the community that were actually from there, and a lot of representation from the corporations, but it was like trying to get community input on how to look at climate change as an economic opportunity. And so, in that conversation, we started to hear the term America's Arctic a lot more. And so just going back to, that paternalism, that this national security drive and motivation, and like this is the threat of what this type of project poses. It's more of, people don't really need to be informed because it's national security, and just more of colonization. So we're proud. I am proud to have grown up in Inupiaq, Nunaat, Inupiaq lands, and the U.S. may be there for a while longer, but we all know who really is going to be sustaining the land for the long term.
It's for the record. I'll try to bring it as far as I can.
So, I'm originally from Alaska, and some of my fellow clan members and family. What I try to get people to understand when we talk about climate change is we may be, as Alaska Natives, the first to be impacted, but we are by no means the only one being impacted. Look in your grocery store. Who has bought salmon? In your restaurants, who has bought salmon? Who buys seafood? Who buys pollock? The fish sticks that you feed your children usually come from Alaskan cod or pollock. These foods are in your grocery store. And it's the fruits that you buy, and it doesn't matter where you buy it. If it's happening in South America, if it's happening in anywhere, you are ingesting this. It may be happening, the pollutants are happening, maybe not on your doorstep, but they're making it to your supermarkets.
Did anybody else have any questions or comments, or is this new to any aha moments?
My name is Pat. I worked for several years in Bethel, Alaska, with the Yukon-Kuskokwim Health Corporation, and I'm just you talked a lot, and I certainly am very interested in what's happening out on your islands. But Alaska is a huge state, as you know, and there are lots of other parts. I'm wondering if there are any of these kind of projects going on in other parts of Alaska.
Thank you.
So the stratospheric aerosol injection technique, the NOAA just converted a bunch of old bombers to be able to sniff aerosols in the atmosphere, and they flew their planes about 5 miles above Alaska to track the aerosols so they can get ready to start testing stratospheric aerosol injection. They're also testing a lot of ocean fertilization because of the CDR. A lot of people are like, we need to make the ocean a huge carbon sink. They're actually, this is not geoengineering, but it's related because all of this is tied back to the carbon market, and the carbon market is linked directly to the Paris Agreement in Article 6 specifically. I mean, the CBD, like nobody, like the CBD is so dwarfed by the UNFCCC. Everybody's invested, except now, of course, they're by 30 is jumping into the CBD as well. So the billionaires are jumping over there. But they're trying to count whales as offsets now. And we're actually going to have a workshop about sacred relatives tomorrow because they're trying to put whales on the carbon markets. The IMF is trying to privatize the migratory pathways of whales. And we know that when they've used land as offsets, they've still allowed mining corporations to come in. The indigenous peoples can't interact with their land anymore, but mining can still come in and develop. So what do you think is going to happen if the IMF privatizes the migratory pathways of whales? Everybody is obsessed right now with deep sea mining, right? They're wanting to get their hands on that. So all of this is linked back. There's a group called Make Sunsets who deployed in Mexico. You're probably familiar with that because Mexico then banned outdoor experiments for solar geoengineering. But they were cooking fertilizer to make sulfur dioxide and filling balloons and releasing them into the sky. And Mexico's like, no, you can't do that. So then they went to Reno, and then they were doing it out of a hotel room. Cooking fertilizer in a hotel room. And so in Alaska, there's another fellow. His name is Rust George. Some people call him Rusty George. Because he wants to use iron ore. He's dumping iron ore into the oceans. He's trying to do this off the coast of Kodiak right now. He did this in 2012 in Canada. And the year 2013 is when you saw an increase in toxic algal blooms and poisoning in Alaska. And so it's like still impacting us. They actually did the experiment. Elon Musk has this contest called X Prize. You've got people in Australia dumping artificial whale poop into the ocean as fertilizer because there are regulations against spreading real whale poop, but there are no regulations against spreading artificial whale poop. And what else is happening in Alaska? There's a lot of offsets, a lot of offsetting, and then a lot of if you look at I really encourage you to look at the geoengineering map at Geoengineering Monitor. Yeah. There's stuff like even weather alteration that was tracked to the military bases in the 70s. There are so many geoengineering experiments. And the governor just passed a carbon management and monetization bill. And that is all about carbon capture and storage, which is a whole beast. It's like a huge beast of geoengineering. It's where they try to either suck carbon where it's being emitted and condense it into a liquid form and then store it somewhere. There's also direct air capture where they try to suck carbon from the atmosphere itself and condense it. The problem with this is carbon is extremely corrosive. It will eat away at any container that you're keeping it in, and when it comes out, it expands into a gas. It turns into carbon monoxide. There was a carbon pipeline explosion in Sartosha, Mississippi in 2021. Was it 2021? 2022 maybe. And the folks there, they saw the green cloud of gas come, and they couldn't get away because when they tried to start their cars, there wasn't enough oxygen to combust their engines. It was so saturated with carbon monoxide. People were foaming at the mouth. They were very confused. So the plan is to create carbon storage in the Cook Inlet, and 97%, I think, of the carbon in the United States that's captured is utilized for enhanced oil recovery, which is where they take the captured carbon and they flush it through nearly depleted oil wells to get more oil faster.
In some ways, I have to admit that researchers are really scuzzy in this area, but I want to have a caveat. it's not Alaska researchers. Researchers that are the principal offenders are imports. They're outsiders. They really don't seem to know much about the way Alaska scientists and researchers interact with the local communities. It's what we do. It's what we have to do. I don't know where these other people start, but they don't do things like Alaska researchers do, Arctic researchers. So I just want to tell you that our people are good people. Those people are not.
Yeah, there was a general like just upset amongst after, we did our best to introduce in a really neutral way, do the interview, and let people have their genuine reactions, which I feel like there was even an openness amongst folks to say, if this would work, like we want to do something, we care, we want to do something, but this is not gonna be good. But there was like, the people weren't like super closed-minded, but people just didn't know about it, and researchers were generally like, what the heck? All the ones that we were able to interview, but
yeah.
One thing you never see promoted in these projects is what we really need to do, which is to cut fossil fuel use. It is never mentioned. These are all band-aids. These are all things, workarounds. And if you take a look at who's funding, who's supporting, fossil fuel industry's heavy in there, but it never, that's why we call them false solutions. It never goes to the heart of what we really need to do. It's a dangerous distraction.
Thank you. I'll sit over here because I don't want to be blocking the camera. Uvanga Frunga, Akaga Mary Francis Kavak, Apaka Busterea Kavak. Hi, my Inupiaq name is Frunga. My English name is Sunny or Helen. My family's from Barrow or Utqiagvik, but I live in Fairbanks. Disclaimer that I did not grow up in Barrow, but I'm still a part of the community. And I want to say thank you to all the panelists for sharing. And I've had so many side thoughts and things I want to add, and I'm sure I'll forget because it's hot out and I'll think about it later and be like, oh, I should have said this. But I am also a graduate student at UAF, and I'm a graduate student in the Indigenous Studies program. So a part of what we are introduced into is how to have quality research practices within Indigenous communities, especially Alaska Native communities. And what it really is relationship building. It's being in community with these people and seeing them as people, not as these research subjects, not as something that you can write down and get a grant about and brag about it with your fellow researchers and these huge conferences that happen thousands of miles away from where the people live, the community lives. That is not something that can happen over these grant periods that only last a few months. Oftentimes the knowledge that is really impactful for these research projects is knowledge that you have to gain through respectful relationships and mutual trust. And that's something that happens over years. And I was also a part of the Arctic Assembly, and I went with Panganga in 2022, and that was in Iceland. And I'm really grateful that I was given that opportunity. I used to work at an organization called Saylor and Sara is a part of that organization as well. And we do a lot of advocacy for a just transition and fighting against development on our homelands in the North Slope. But part of this Arctic Assembly was there were so many decision makers and so many lawmakers and so many important people that were a part of this assembly, and it was so expensive to attend that realistically the people that are most impacted by these projects are not able to attend. And I forgot who said it, but it's the basically the poor people are the people that are most impacted. and just reflecting on that and seeing that, you know, the representatives from our communities were the people that had the highest profits from extraction from our communities. And I'm going to go on a little sidetrack and say that, you know, we are talking a lot about the legal logistics and like all of the things that happen with these non-native entities and how they treat us. And this isn't to talk poorly of our community, but to instead try to inspire change in the way that we have these conversations. Is that it's not safe to really talk about not having no development on our land. And that's because, you know, 90%, 95% of our public funding comes from oil development. Sorry, I get really emotional too, real easily. And it's because, you know, we have to survive in an extractivist, consumerist society, and that is inherently contradictory to our traditional beliefs. And I'm hoping that our younger generation, I've had a lot of conversations with people within our communities, and especially the younger generations, and we recognize that, you know, it's not safe to have these conversations. And you know, we want to see a different reality, and right now that we're kind of being gaslit into thinking that extraction is the only option, and that's not the reality at all. And realistically, it's within my generation or future generations that oil extraction won't be a possibility within our lands, and we have to figure out how we can take care of our communities outside of a non-regenerative economy. And we have to think of a just transition and prioritize the people that are most impacted by extraction, which is side related to geoengineering. But geoengineering also is not the solution either. You know, it's not sustainable, it's greenwashing, it's green capitalism. And what the true answer is that we have to reimagine our relationship with consumption. We can't continue living and believing that there is this endless profit growth, endless consumption, without repercussions on our society and on our environments as well. But that's all. I think that's all I wanted to add. So Kriyanak.
Can I respond to that? I thank you so much for that comment, and I want to. There was so much that people said, and we had to choose kind of what we were going to share. But there was generally like people are not going to want to talk to you about this. Like this is not a conversation, and a lot of, you know, we do have relationships like with people, and we worked in Utqiagvik for a long time with Dishan, who I married, and so people were willing to talk to us because of those relationships, because of Panganga, because of, you know, but people did. It was really uncomfortable, and people are like, nobody's gonna want to talk to you. Nobody's gonna want to talk to you. This is really uncomfortable. It's like definitely came up. So I want to. Would you, Perry? Would you like to make some comments or observations?
Comments about our environment, you know, it's changing. The ice is thinning, the weather's getting worse. It's affecting the migration patterns, and it's affecting our hunting techniques. We are starting to evolve with the climate. We are becoming quicker. We're trying to be more efficient, because we can't stay long, and it's changing, and it's uncomfortable, and it's not safe. It's crazy. Okay.
Thank you. Oh. Here you go.
Hi. Did you guys talk about the bio assets? Okay. Yeah. So I worked for about 25 years protecting the land from extraction in Alaska. So we like kept the oil companies out of the Arctic Refuge. We managed to stop Shell from drilling offshore in the Beaufort Sea, the Chukchi Sea. We got the moratorium for Bristol Bay. We worked hard to support the people that were impacted by the Exxon Valdez oil spill that are still impacted to this day. You can walk on the beach, you dig a little bit, the oil is still there. It doesn't go away. And the health of the people's impacted in Alaska. Our people, wherever there's extraction happening, our people are getting sick, upper respiratory illnesses. And so for our people, and then I worked on persistent organic pollutants too back in the day. So down this way, all of these factories creating like dioxin, emitting it into the air. And these toxins, what happens is they migrate to the cold regions and they bioaccumulate in the cold regions. Then when it warms up, they disperse back into the land. So we're getting impacted by that. Our women can't feed their babies because of all the toxins in the body. It's a choice. It's an active choice. You have to decide. Are you willing to transfer that to your newborn? And mercury contamination, all the gold mining, all the military dumping, all those toxic sites. I've worked on all those issues. And but the biggest one for me is climate change. Climate change is the result of all of this extraction that's happened around the world, right? Fossil fuels, it's human caused. But it is a hot issue, and no one wants to say, okay, yeah, we're part of the problem. Yeah. And it's Native people that are running these Native corporations that are part of the extraction. It's our own people. And so we're not only fighting the feds, the state, the multinational mining companies, oil companies, the federal military, we're also fighting our own. But that's the hardest fight. But it hasn't been that long. We need to decolonize our own people. We need to fix the mind of our people and bring our people back to who we originally were before all these acts that passed that created the situation we're in. It just opened the door. And I really believe we can do it. I believe it. As long as we educate our young people, leaders like Inupiaq and there's sovereignty activists in Alaska, they're still holding that message. We need to get those people out. We need to get out all over the state of Alaska and talk about geoengineering, false solutions. When I got back involved, I took a little 5-year, 6-year break, and I got back involved, went to New York with Panganga and the crew, and I find out that they're bringing back the mastodon. I thought they were joking. They were talking about it, and I thought they were just joking. And then I said, "You're kidding, right?" She's like, "No." And there's another thing that's happening that's targeting Alaska, which we really need to let our people know about, is habitat for caribou is being targeted as carbon sinks. Whales are being seen now as bioassets, carbon sinks, living bioassets. Salmon, bioassets. So these companies that are funneling these multi-millions into false solutions, red projects, geoengineering, they're also funneling money to that. So what they did, I found, is they bought a creek that's by the border of Alaska and Canada, south central region, Atna area, and they own that as carbon sinks. So I asked Gary Harrison, I said, "Do you think you can fish there now? Do you think you can go get your salmon there?" He was like, "I don't think so." I was like, "Yeah, they own it. They bought it." So if they do that with the caribou, they do that with the whales, they do that with they're planning it with the buffalo, we can't hunt. They're going to lock us out. saying that this is a solution to climate change, which they're creating up north too. So I just wanted to touch on that. It's just crazy. They're playing God.
That salmon they called gold salmon. It's Tiffany's and Apple, and they're offsetting their gold mining. And they're using salmon as a biodiversity offset. So they're saying that they destroyed the salmon habitats over here, but don't worry, they're restoring them over here, offsetting. I think we have 5 minutes until the next one. So maybe we'll take a break unless anybody has any other questions. Otherwise, you can ask them next door because our next workshop is going to be over there in 5 minutes.
Shameless plug for the next workshop. We're going to talk about some of our international allies, some of the stuff we're doing inside and outside the UN, some stuff that's going on, how IEN got involved, some storytelling about that. And tomorrow there's a workshop by the group called Hoodwink that puts out the little zine. I'll talk very briefly there, but there's going to be breakout groups. So people that want to talk more deeply just on this subject we'll have just conversation on it.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you. It was about 30 people who we spoke with for this project. And I just want to thank every one of them for sharing.
You've been listening to the Indigenous Environmental Network. For more information, go to ienearth.org.